Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first episode, the first episode of our all new podcast series that we are starting, which is titled The Maple Leaf. Perhaps you might have seen the maple leaf on the Canadian flag. So, a podcast based on that, of course, to share with you hot topics, new current trends in the immigration space. And this podcast will be powered by Kurzfeld Law. For those of you who do not know what Kurzfeld Law is and who haven't heard of it, I would like to give you a small introduction because this is our first episode and we would not want you to go into details of what we're talking about without an introduction of what Kurzfeld Law is. So, Kurzfeld Law is an immigration law office which is fully licensed, regulated, based in Toronto, Canada, and the firm actually delivers unparalleled representation at consistently reasonable fees and reasonable payment plans to people across the globe. And they actually handle all kinds of immigration cases, from express entry to study permits to visitor visas to business immigration, and so on and so forth, and to clients from all over the world. So no matter where you are, if you need immigration support, you can reach out to Kurzfeld Law, and they typically represent sophisticated cases and also complex and more difficult cases. Of course, with the help of the guest we have uh, at the show today, Ronen Kurzfeld, who is a licensed immigration lawyer based in Toronto, Canada, and he has 20 years of experience, a lot of lessons learned over the past 20 years, and he has helped over 5,000 people move to Canada over these years, but maybe many more thousands more than the 5,000. Yeah, so he has that experience. He knows what to do in the immigration space and how to get us an applicant to be successful no matter what immigration plan you have. So if you have, of course, plans to move to Canada, you know where to reach out to. You just have to reach out to us at Kurzfeld Law, and we do the rest for you. So today we have the first episode of our Maple Leaf podcast, the first of many episodes, of course, and we have discussed many topics which we want to discuss here in the immigration space and enlighten you about what you can do about different immigration programs. And the Canadian immigration space, of course, has developments every single day, so we'd like to bring those developments to you and keep you updated about them. So today we are going to discuss something very, very interesting. We're going to discuss about visitor visas and the scope of it and so on and so forth. So before that, let's me welcome Ronen to the show. Ronen, how are you? How are you doing? How has the week been?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And we're always very excited to be here. And as you said, this is the first of many, many, many podcasts. So
Yeah, thank you
pleasure
so
to
much.
be here.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be hosting you, of course, and listening to you about the different kind of immigration programs and so on and so forth. Of course, it will be a learning curve for me and many other people who are listening to this podcast. And maybe this podcast might be a game changer for someone out there who make a call to get in touch with us and you know take their move to Canada, right? So let's discuss about visitor visas and what we can do about it. Ronan, I would like to ask you. See, visitor visas is something very different to what we have in other countries. The other countries call it the tourist visa or whatever, right? So I would like to ask you, what is the scope of a visitor visa? Who is applicable to apply for one? Is there any specific objective the IRCC has with this visitor visa?
Right. So whenever we discuss visa, we have to distinguish between citizens of countries that require a visa to come in and others that do not require. So let's start with the easy one. Those who do not require, unless you're from the US, if you do not require a visitor visa, you need to apply online for something we call an ETA. Okay, you pay $7 online. Usually you get the ETA within few seconds, few minutes in your email, and typically it's good for 10 years, but always check the expiry date. That will allow you to board the airplane, okay? If you're coming from a land border, you don't need the ETA. If you're from a visa exempt country, we always tell clients for the ETA, be truthful. So if you ever applied before and got refused, or if you have a criminal record, they ask those questions. So you have to be truthful, because if not, A, it's a misrepresentation, and B, you can have problems coming in. So that's for the countries that do not require a visitor visa. The other countries, which probably the majority that require a visitor visa, it's a very large scope. So there can be many reasons to come and visit, whether it's to visit relatives, friends, family, just sightseeing, right, to see our beautiful country, maybe to come to concert, to cultural events, to sports events. So that's the typical visitor visa. But there are also another type of visitors, which are business visitors. Okay, so whether they're being sent from a company, whether it's related to a contract between a foreign and a Canadian company, maybe just to explore business opportunities. So the scope is quite large, but even the business visitors will have to apply for a visitor visa if they're not from a country that is exempt.
Right. So even if you're a tourist and you're just visiting Canada, so the ideal pathway would be to come through a visitor visa, is it? So, or otherwise you have
Correct.
the visa, which is a tourist visa.
Yeah, so tourist and visitor is used interchangeably. So visitor is to visit, right? So you can visit for tourist reasons, you can visit for business reasons. So it's really case by case, but that's the umbrella for all the people who want to come and visit here. So what's the difference in temporary resident visa and a visitor visa? Temporary resident visa is mainly the broad term for all temporary visas. It can be visitor, it can be work permit, it can be study permit. So usually that's anything which is not permanent. The visitor visa is a class under the temporary resident visa, and that's for the purpose of visit. So even if you apply for a work permit or for a study permit, you're still a temporary resident, right? Even if you got approved. So visitor is no different.
Right. Okay. So visitor visa is basically a subclass, like you said, under TRV, which ideally means okay, you're going to be a temporarily a resident in the country, right? That's what it means, if I make
Correct.
sense.
So yeah, so we always tell clients don't get confused with the semantics. Okay, if you want to visit for whatever purpose, it's visitor visa. If you want to work, it's a work permit. If you're applying to study, it's a study permit. Always keep it real, as we like to say. Keep it related to the facts, and because when you start being confused with the semantics of IRCC, you'll never get out of it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When you open the website, there's so much of information. Sometimes, as people who want to attempt migration, they read about it and they get sometimes very confused about how it's structured out there. So, again, talking about visitor visas, what do you have to exactly prove to get a visitor visa?
So for visa, we always say there's three main components. Okay,
Okay.
that's the best way to simplify it. First, and that's the easy one. What's the purpose of your trip? Is it to see family, relatives, sightseeing, cultural events? Maybe it's a business reason. So that's the first thing you have to satisfy the officer that you have a genuine purpose to visit. Usually that's the easy part. Okay. The second part you have to show, or the applicant needs to show that they actually can pay for the trip. So whether it's their own funds, through relatives, or maybe somebody is inviting them in Canada, maybe it's paid for in advance, maybe not. But the officer has to be satisfied that whoever is coming can pay for their stay, right, for the visit. The third one is usually the hard one. That's the ties back home. So as you said before, this is a temporary visa. So whoever is the applicant needs to show that they have ties back home, or that really they're going to abide by the terms of the visa, which is temporary stay. So if the officer thinks that's not the purpose here, it can be refused. And there are many ways to prove it. It's really a case by case, but people sometimes show property, family ties, maybe work ties, maybe they can show that they well traveled in other countries and they abided by the rules and the terms of the visas of those countries. So there's a very delicate craft to show to prove that point. But typically, whenever there's a refusal, the officer typically will refuse on that basis.
Right, brilliant. So I would like to also ask you, see, somebody, we all have relatives in Canada. It's an immigrant community after all. someone out there is in Canada. And do you think that seeking any help or support from a Canadian PR holder or a citizen would by any chance help the our visitor visa application to get approved? Is there any
So,
chances like that?
so it's not somewhat helping because there's no weight to it. The weight, again, it goes to the three things that we showed. So, if somebody has a relative here who's a citizen or permanent resident, or even maybe a relative that is studying in Canada, working in Canada, so that's the purpose of the visit. Second, if that person in Canada invites them to stay in their home, or maybe paying for some of the accommodation or part of the trip, that goes into the second element about the ability to pay for the trip. But just having somebody in Canada is not mandatory, and on its own, it's not something that will grant somebody a visa.
Right, brilliant. So I would like to also know, say now there is this rule that often a lot of people get on their refusal notes. If you see, they have this clause that comes up that so and so we fear that they might not return back to their country and so on and so forth. That's a general clause that visa officers use when they refuse an application. So, do you think that when they have relatives out there, doesn't it more or less establish the fact that this person might be going to stay back there and will not come back to the country? Will it affect our application? I'm counter questioning you. Perhaps maybe you can answer that as well.
No, so we always say it goes into part one, and it's definitely legitimate to want to visit a relative in Canada. Now, that being said, if an officer refuses on that basis, I think that's reviewable in court, right? So we always tell our clients, say the truth. If you're coming to see a relative, don't make up a different story. You're not coming for an exhibition here. You're not coming to see Niagara Falls or the Rockies. If the reason is to visit a relative, that's what you have to state, and it's definitely a legitimate reason. So
Right.
we always tell people, don't think, because we get a lot. Well, I have a partner in Canada, but if I tell them I have a partner, I'm going to get refused. The reality, the reason why you're coming is to see a partner, we always say you have to disclose it, and you can use it to your advantage if you do it properly.
Okay, suppose you say that I come to Canada to visit and I see the beautiful nature, how welcoming they are to immigrants and so forth, so on and so forth, and then I happen to like the place there. So, see, as a visitor in other countries, you generally see that you cannot do much, but you have to go back home and then attempt to come back to that country. If I happen to visit Canada, do I have the chance to convert the visitor visa into maybe another TRV? Maybe it's a work permit or a study permit. Do I have that opportunity?
Yeah, so it's not something that converts automatically, but you're allowed to be in Canada as a visitor while you apply for a work permit. So, for
Okay.
instance, if you find an employer, right now, the way the law is structured, you don't have to leave. You can keep you here legally as a visitor until you change your status to work permit. And the same goes for study permit as well.
Right, that's brilliant. So I have heard of this concept. I'm not sure how true is that. In fact, it's called. I read it somewhere. It's called flag polling, right? Where you kind of go to the border and like speak to the immigration officers there and try to get your visa converted without going through the entire process. Is it a viable process or an
No, so
acceptable?
flag polling, of course, is viable, but it's not exactly as you explained it. So flagpole, it's not you coming and talking and saying, "Look, change my status." Really,
Okay.
let's use a work permit as an example. If you have a Canadian employer, whether the employer gets LMIA or if it's an LMIA exempt work permit, once that is obtained, if you're here as a visitor, yes, we can do an application that you take to the port of entry at the border. That's called flagpole. The whole process that you go out to the US border, you come back, and then you apply at the border, and definitely you can get your visa, in this example, the work permit on the spot. So we do a lot of flagpole, we encourage it, but it's not just to go blindly. You have to be ready and you have to be eligible, because if you're not eligible, it's not going to work.
Okay, brilliant. So I would like to also know about, a lot of people apply for Canadian visitor visas and they get refused. So Does such a refusal, put a bad mark on their immigration history, whereas they would not be able to apply for another country and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so we get that question a lot. About other countries, I can't answer because we only do Canadian immigration. But in terms of Canada, you can definitely reapply. Typically, how we treat it, if it's still within the time to file an application with the court, we'll file the application that stops the clock to appeal. We're going to get the notes from the Department of Justice and from Immigration, and then we can review and say, you know what, maybe this one you should refile, and then we discontinue the application. Or maybe, look, based on the reasons, you have a pretty strong case with the court to appeal this and get it reviewed, and then we continue with the court case. Now, if the time already expired or lapsed to file an appeal with the court, then we typically, if we have the time, we get the notes and then we refile by addressing the officer's concern.
Right. So again, let me ask you one more other questions here. A lot of people come from India and so on and so forth. They want to visit their children in Canada who have, of course, migrated, and they would love to stay for the longest period of time in Canada, right? Generally, if they apply for a visitor visa, how long is their visa valid, and how does that work generally in the IRCC?
So how it works, once an applicant gets a visitor visa, that allows them to come to Canada. But the final decision of the length of stay and whether even to admit is with the officer at the port of entry. So yes, you can have a situation, you have a TRV glued to your passport, but they don't let you in if they think you're going to come for a different purpose. Typically, that's not an issue, of course. And I would say the general rule is 6 months minus a date. That's initially what you can stay for, unless the officer gives you a different date and they will specify that. But even the date 6 months minus a day, if you need to stay, you can file an extension inland and you don't have to leave until you have a decision.
Okay. So does that extension work like does it take long for that extension to happen, or you have to leave if the visa expires
No, you
before?
have Yeah, no, you have to file prior to the expiry date, but you can remain until there's a decision. Right now, the processing time is about 4 to 5 months. So, for example, if you filed it 5 months after you came in, you can stay an extra 4 or 5 months, even when even when your visa expires,
So
as
basically,
long
if
as
I
you file the extension. As long as you file the extension, very important.
oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, another one more thing that I would like to ask. This would be the last question. I'm sorry for like putting in a
No,
lot
no,
of questions. Like,
this is fun.
yeah, this is fun, of course.
Yeah.
How does applying for a visitor visa through an RCIC licensed immigration lawyer help? Because see, a lot of the other countries, when you want to apply for a visitor visa, what we generally do is we would go to the embassy or the consulate, and we would apply straight there, right? While I know that there is the option of applying to Canada for visitor visa, uh, by yourself, all by yourself. How does applying through an immigration lawyer help?
Yeah, so people can definitely allowed to apply by themselves. There is a stat which I don't have next to me, but that most refusals are for either self-represented or sometimes for consultant. So as long as you use a lawyer or a very reputable consultant, as I said, we know what to target, right? So those three things, to keep it simple: the purpose of the trip, the ability to pay, and the ability to really abide by the terms of the visa and return home. I know it sounds simple, but there's a craft and there's a way to present it. And once you do it in the proper way, then it's very easy for the officer to hopefully approve your application.
Yeah, probably they would. I mean, like if you go through an immigration lawyer, they probably know that he's going to appeal if they refuse. So in
Yeah,
that case,
that's
might even
yeah,
approve.
that's also there. That's mostly of the human element, but a proper application is one that you're ready to go to court. So it's prepared with, hopefully, and you're very optimistic that it'll be approved by the officer. But if not, then this will be reviewable by the judge, or the Department of Justice will settle. So as long as you build those applications in this way, you definitely enhance your chances.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's all from my side. Any closing remarks before we conclude today's first episode?
No, I'm waiting to see everybody here. Look, I think Canada processes, I think, over 1 million applications for visitor a year. So come enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. I would love to visit there.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to that. Uh,
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining the episode today. We will look forward to having another chat, maybe on something very interesting, something sometime soon. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to this episode, and perhaps probably someone could have benefited from it. And if you really want any help with regards to immigration, whether it's visitor visa, whether it's a study permit, or any kind of immigration services to Canada, you know who to reach out to. We are just a call away, and you may perhaps call us or email us through those details that we have at the end of this episode. Thank you very much once again. Until we talk to you guys next time, we will sign out here. Bye.
No, Kumar. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.